So welcome to our second part discussion on the business cycle. And where we left off, we were talking about the Keynesian revolution and how John Maynard Keynes was trying to explain how and why the business cycle can deviate from the long-term trend of growth and spend long periods of time in recession. And what we're going to do now is talk about the business cycle itself, and we're going to try to break down the business cycle into parts. Now, ideally or idealistically, the business cycle looks like this. What do we have here? We have real GDP here, which is, again, this is a measurement of economic activity, and we look at it over time, and we see that over time there is a long-term growth trend. In other words, the United States and many other types of economies tend to expand over time, but the growth isn't as stable as this line portrays. In reality, you have growth around that long-term trend. And so this red line represents the short-run business cycle. The green line is the long-run business cycle. So when most people talk about the business cycle, they're talking about the short-run business cycle. And what's important about the short-run business cycle is what you see here, these peaks and these troughs. These are what we call I'm sorry, let me write a little bit more clear. These are what we call turning points. And a turning point is when the economy stops expanding and starts to contract, or stops contracting and starts to expand. So these are what you would call the points where economic activity reverses. And I tell you this much, if you can predict consistently peaks and troughs, you will be a very rich person. Everybody is interested in when the economy hits a turning point. And it brings up a very important point when it comes to economic indicators. Economic indicators sometimes are used as an early warning system to predict a turning point. And this is one of the reasons why it's very important to understand economic indicators, because they help you understand the business cycle, and they can help you maybe predict a turning point. Now, again, this whole growth process, this is idealized. This looks very, very predictable, huh? In reality, it's not like that. Here is the actual growth, GDP growth. So you can see here we have the growth rate of GDP right here over time. Down here we have time. And you can see the long-term growth rate. So in other words, if I go back here, let's just say that this growth rate right here, this growth rate is a 3% trend. Well, we could portray that right here. Let's say the economy long-term grows at 3%. Well, we know that the actual growth rate, the short-term business cycle, you have growth above and below that trend. So you can see this is not nearly as predictable as the last graph. And you can see the United States has spent periods of time growing above trend and periods of time growing below trend. And whenever this line right here, this green line, whenever this line is above 0, the economy is expanding. Whenever this is below 0, the economy is contracting. So when this line is in this gray zone, that's below 0, that's a recession. Now, when the economy is above 0 but below its long-term trend, we call that a growth recession. Right here, growth recession. The gray is just a recession. Now let's break down the business cycle into parts. Now there is no agreed upon way of doing this. I've seen analysts break down the business cycle into 2 parts, 5 parts. Most break it down into 4 parts, or 4 distinct stages. One stage is, this is a contraction stage. And that's what we call trough to recovery. Stage 2 is an expansion stage. Stage 3 is also an expansion stage. And stage 4 is a contraction stage. So we've got 4 stages, 2 of which show the economy contracting, 2 of which show them expanding. So let's put this on a graph. And here we have, again, this is idealized here. The stages do not necessarily last during equal periods of time, like you sees here. So please understand that. This is just for simplicity. And you can see stage 1, the economy is contracting, and that's what you call trough to recovery. And here, the recession is about to end, but the economy is contracting. And the contraction can be due to a number of different reasons. But for some reason, demand has dropped and production has dropped with it. And this means you cut prices, you lay off workers, and the economy is in recession. But there is an automatic stabilizer here. The automatic stabilizer is falling prices. When prices fall low enough, some people are going to start to buy again. And businesses at some point do have to replenish their inventories. And this is what's going to stop the economy from contracting and hit a trough turning point. Now the economy is going to start to pick up. And this is the recovery to expansion phase, stage 2. And so the economy is slowly expanding, mainly due to price cuts. But when businesses have to hire people to replenish inventories, people start to earn more income. And when they earn more income, the economy starts to expand without the aid of price cuts. That's important. This is how you know you transition from the early part of stage 2 to the latter part of stage 2. The latter part of stage 2 is driven mainly by income, not by price cuts. Now the economy starts to hit on all cylinders. It's starting to hit a full capacity, and this leads to increase in demand, which leads to an increase in production, which leads to an increase in bank lending activity. And so things are going really, really well. But the party's going to end right here. And what's causing this party to end? What's causing the economy to start to contract? Well, firms and households have greater access to credit in the latter part of this expansion right here. And this is going to mean that demand is driven by income and credit. But once credit is maxed, no more, the credit driver is taken away from the economy. And then, of course, how do you pay back the money that you borrowed? You use your income. So that's another source of demand that's taken away. And so the economy starts to contract, and the recession starts. So there are many reasons why economic activity can expand and contract. The only one aspect of the business cycle that is the same is the fact that, I like my little graphic here, is that they are similar in some ways, but they are always unique in terms of the cause of the expansion and the cause of the contraction. Now, who's in charge of measuring the business cycle? Well, there is a agency that is charged with it. They're called the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER, and they are the official body. That's not a government institution, but if you go to the nber.org, they could show you all of the official peaks and troughs for the business cycle. And here's some data, by the way. Let's go to the last recession. The last recession, in December 2008, the Business Cycle Dating Committee announced that a 6-year expansion, stages 2 and 3, had come to an end in December 2007. So December 2007, is the start of the last recession. And it's going to be and then in September 2010, they told us that the recession lasted for 18 months and ended in June 2009. And so June 2009 is the end of the recession. So if we put these dates on our graphic here, you can see that here we have the start of the recession, the peak was at December, and the trough was in June 2009, and that was a total of 18 months. So you can see this is 18 months. But the expansion previously lasted 73 months. So you could see, there is a problem with me spacing these stages in equal distance, because it's not reality. This lasted 73 months, so we would have to expand these. And this stages 4 and 1 here lasted only 18 months. So that's important for you to know. So that's the basics for the business cycle. I want you to understand how this relates to aggregate supply and aggregate demand, because aggregate supply and aggregate demand show what's happening to the economy in terms of output at one period of time. This is showing what's happening to the economy over time. So this is a dynamic look at the economy. Aggregate supply and aggregate demand is a static look at the economy. Okay, that's all for now.